Hello and welcome to another episode of Pakistonomy. My name is Uzair, and we've been sort of interviewing a lot of founders who've been doing excellent work in Pakistan startup ecosystem, which, by the way, has gone and grown by leaps and bounds in the last few months alone. The latest data shows that just this year, so far in 2021, the first 9 months or so of this calendar year, Pakistan startups have raised more money than the last 3, 4, 5 years combined, based on how you count the numbers. So we are in an excellent place, and I think the entire ecosystem is at this sort of rising point in the S curve where a lot of innovation, a lot of new investment is coming in, a lot of change will happen. And I think from my own point of view, a lot of this change and disruption is important to Pakistan's economy because there are sectors that need a lot of innovation and disruption. So today we're going to be talking to a pair of co-founders that again has started a startup in July of this year called Tazah. And Mohsin and Abrar started this and have had a seed funding round of $2 million. Congratulations to both of you on that. And really, for me, what's exciting is that this is a startup that is going to be impacting the agricultural sector, which needs a lot of innovation and disruption in Pakistan. So, Mohsin and Abrar, first of all, welcome to Pakistonomy. Second of all, congratulations on an amazing seed funding round. And just starting off, like, tell us a bit about Tazah. How did the idea come about, and what is it that you're trying to do in the Pakistani agricultural space?
Hey, Uzair, thank you. Thank you for having us. Very excited to be here. Thank you, Uzair. Thank you. Thank you very much. And yes, Taza, right? So we met. I met Mohsin when we were working at Careem. We were trying to solve similar problems from a different perspectives, and we were spending a lot of time trying to turn Careem around after the pandemic. And at one point in time, I think we started thinking that you know uh, Kareem has created such a large impact, and we spent so much time sort of solving for Kareem. But if we were to do something together and go for even a larger impact problem in Pakistan, we could do wonders, right? So Kareem has done so well in solving the mobility sector problems in Pakistan through technology. So we felt that we could together work on something which could create even larger impact in Pakistan. And agriculture kept coming up in terms of what could we do. Why? Because it's such a large space. Why? Because it's so instrumental, it's so central to what Pakistan is, what we do here, what we eat, how we move, all that. And the amount of inefficiency that also exists in this supply chain, in how the fresh produce moves in Pakistan, how meat moves in Pakistan, how different agricultural crops move in Pakistan, and how inefficient it is, just felt like a huge problem to solve. It took us a year to sort of build our conviction. It took us a lot of time to sort of jump into this, leave our cushy jobs, and get into something so hard, so messy. But I think somewhere in July 2021, we realized that yes, this is a problem to solve. This happened after us speaking to hundreds of people, stakeholders within the supply chain, farmers, businesses, artis, people who are sort of a bit away from the supply chain, people in logistics, people in warehousing, and all kinds of stakeholders. And the more we spoke, the more we realized that we were onto something big. And at one point in time, after struggling quite a bit on trying to sort of find the right solution for the market, we felt that we had hit something big. We hit a nerve, and then at that point in time we said, yes, we're in, and we're going to sort of do this for the long term, which is for a problem like this, it means 5 to 10 years. And that's how Taza was born. Also, both of us have families who've been involved in one form of agriculture or the other, or so it also sort of was a problem that we had seen closely before, and it also was something which was personal. So it's just felt right, like the right thing to do. And July was when we said, yes, let's do this.
So help me understand what the product is in terms of what Taza will do in the agricultural space. Obviously, it's a big space, right? You could do everything from cold storage to marketplace to connecting people, getting farmers better seed, fertilizer, etc. So what's the core product offering?
Right. So great question. I think the main what we have as a vision in the long term is we want to build an operating system for the agriculture and food value chain, an operating system which is much more efficient, and an operating system that works for works for the many and not for the few, an operating system which is reduces some of the inefficiencies and provides more value to the stakeholders, including farmers and businesses. And in its current shape and form, what we have is a B2B marketplace for fresh produce, which will eventually transition into this operating system. So our starting point is, fruits and vegetables, over where, the problem is much more amplified because of extreme perishability in these goods, a very high fragmentation of, producers spread across Pakistan, and, again, a very high fragmentation of businesses that consume these products on the demand side. That's where we're starting out from. We're building a B2B marketplace where we buy fresh produce from the farmers and we sell it to the customers, and thereby sort of create a virtuous cycle through which, as we scale, the flywheel is being built. We can provide better prices to our customers. If once we provide better prices to our customers, the customer base grows, and then we can buy more, and that makes a virtuous loop which helps us grow. So that's what we have in today's shape and form.
So the one thing, like the focus is to make the standardization of the product. So like we always tell people, like we are not selling potatoes right now. So we have standardized the product. So like we have 4 types of potatoes. One is for the household use, one is for the restaurants, one for the French fries people. Like, so these kind of standardization that we have created in the industry, which was not there before us.
So you're essentially segmenting the market and saying, look, like the restaurant requires a particular type of quality and quantity. So, they're different. Households will be different because what you're making for aloo gosht is very different than what you're making for French fries, right? But as you sort of procure stuff from farmers, and I think that is a very important part of the equation, because there is issues around price discoverability for farmers. There are issues around long-term around farmer credit access. How do you build a credit history for farmers? Can they get the right inputs, etc.? But, Abrar, you hit an important point, which is perishability. So is the plan on the Tazah side then to say, we're going to procure, and then because Pakistan has issues around storage and perishability, there's a lot of volatility in the market. Tomatoes and onions are key, and sort of we see these volatility a lot in those 2 particular markets. So is the goal then on the Tazah side to sort of have your own vertical integration where you store the product and make sure that volatility goes away? Because I can see that is a big offering, not only to the farmer, but potentially the consumer who says, like I can, by buying through Tazah, I have some level of, comfort around where the price is going to be of the product I buy.
So yeah, I mean, like you said, there's extreme volatility in the prices of items that we operate in, that we sort of buy and sell. At this point in time, we don't think of ourselves as stockists or people who procure these products, store them, and sell them out later. What we see ourselves are as a very efficient supply chain in which we solve against the perishability by making sure that the time difference between the point of harvest to the point of delivery to the customer is very short. We're talking about 18 to 24 hours in a very large, in a geographically dispersed market like Pakistan. You're right in terms of how price volatility impacts how the customer demand, how it impacts the customer experience. It's something that we want to solve in a future problem. Right now, we're very focused on building that efficient supply chain. But as a future point, what we also see us foraying into is contract farming, or farming through which we ensure a certain amount ROI for the farmer, getting a certain price fixed, and making sure that through that we also sort of improve the farmers' margins. We also give them a certain certainty. We also increase the margins that Tazah can make on this, and then we also are able to reduce the price for the final customer and make sure that all of this is very consistent and certain, as opposed to the high amount of volatility that we see in the market. We're confident that we can do this because, one, a key statistic that a lot of people sort of are not aware of is that on average a farmer makes 25 to 30% of the final retail price of the good he sells. So if we talk about a case of mangoes or a kg of mangoes, a farmer makes 25 cents on the dollar, when the 40 rupees a kg a farmer sells it for, it goes as high as 160, 200 rupees per kg when it's finally retailed to the customer. So there's a lot of value locked in, from the point the farmer sells it to the point it gets to a customer. There's a lot of wastage involved. There's multiple layers of logistics involved. There's multiple middlemen involved who on certain occasions are have a rent-seeking behavior. So there's a lot of efficiency that can be brought in, and provide some form of consistency to the prices, and also sort of build margins, and pass some of that value to the farmers and pass some of that value to the businesses.
So that's really exciting, because it's one thing, right? We've heard Pakistan's Finance Minister Shaukat Tareen talk about this publicly on many occasions. Others have talked, but he's been sort of more vocal than most in this case, in the sense that he's like, look, we're leaving value on the table for the farmers. There are a lot of middlemen. There's the government, in a populist tone, likes to call it the mafias, although it's a bit more complicated than that. From your point of view, you've spoken to a lot of people as you were sort of building the business case for what you're trying to do here. Is there an appetite in the market to have this type of disruption? I'm asking this because if you sort of take a look at this middle layer, right? 40 rupee farmer sells the mango, it goes into retail at 200. A lot of money is being made in the middle. And your goal essentially, if you scale up 5 years from now and become dominant in the market, is basically going to take that delta away from a lot of middlemen, many of whom are influential. How does your thinking align with that? That type of disruption that you're aiming for, what's the appetite for that, generally speaking, in terms of as you spoke to people in the market?
So if you look at any, market in Pakistan, whether that's trucking, whether that's warehousing, trucking more so, agriculture, you find a lot of inefficiency. What you find is, one, a lot of inefficiencies. Two, what you find is also, some kind of monopolistic or oligopolistic behavior, but, some kind of cartelization, right? And what we've seen is that, while, they might create some hurdles in how these businesses grow, but they're also generally helpless against technology taking over some of them. So we've seen that with, the taxi mafia that we talked about. We're seeing that real time with, how trucking marketplaces are taking over some of the very established status quo elements in trucking, right? And in as far as like our direct market is concerned, which is agriculture, we're talking about middlemen, RTs, and all. What we see is that the concentration of power is much less in this market as opposed to the other markets, and I'll tell you why. So there are hundreds of mandis in Pakistan. Every mandi has, so we're talking about 30 SKUs. 15 fruits, 15 vegetables. We're just talking about fruits and vegetables, right? And for each fruit and vegetable, we have, 15 artis in a market, right? So we're talking about, 450 artis in one mandi. We're talking about hundreds of mandis, right? So just by the fact of, them being themselves very fragmented, what we feel is that, the concentration of power that they enjoy is not as much. And, if you are able to build a direct linkage, while making sure that you initially work with them, because it's important. I think that it's an easier problem to solve than the other problems that really keep us up in the night. And they are just and we can talk about them. They are fulfilling to these customers that we serve. That's just a huge bottleneck that we didn't envision in the beginning. Making sure that you deliver a consistent quality, that's a nightmare that we didn't sort of foresee earlier. So we feel that this is a problem, but not as big as it's thought of.
So help me understand some of the challenges, right? You mentioned customer fulfillment quality. I'm already thinking about on the back end, just even building the relationship with the farmer to procure the product, right? And having that relationship requires feet on the street or somebody to build the trust. Same thing on the front end in the customer side. You have to acquire the customer, build the trust, fulfill their orders. So what has it been like dealing with some of these challenges? Quality, of course, being a big one, and how you're dealing with some of them.
So I think you want to take this?
So really sorry, Uzair, I have some emergency at home. I have to leave. So really sorry for that.
No worries. That's fine. I hope everything is fine.
Yeah.
Really sorry for that.
No problem. So yes. So I think what we know And again, the experience comes from directly working at startups like Careem and Uber. What we know is that uh, you need to be able to speak the language for you to build that trust. And that language is just not the language you speak. It's just uh, the way you conduct yourself, what you wear, how you speak, and all. And what we learned is that Mohsin was somebody who launched Ricksha category in Pakistan. At the point that he did that, right, it was almost impossible to foresee that these people would be using apps to go pick up customers and even track their routes and all. But how they were able to do it was mainly by using people within that community that such as master trainers, right? Using them as master trainers and using them as community builders, and that's something that was really helpful in that. In our case, also, what we also want to make sure is that we work with the ecosystem, even when we build our retail side of the business, which is customers. We use some of the people who already exist in the market to sort of convince them and build a community. On the farmer side also, what we do is we use, or use is probably the wrong word, but we engage some of these people, some of these farmers to work with us on, and we convince them of what the vision is and how it's going to help them in the long term. Not only them, but the larger farmer community, and then they help us build that community themselves. uh, the other part is, of course, which we'll be venturing into in a later stage, is sort of bringing them on the digital platforms, right? And that, of course, is going to require a lot of a lot of effort on building the right product, making sure that you're using the right technology. Even right now, even using USSD codes, or using WhatsApp, or using the more popular or more easier user friendly tools, that is always on the table. So that is a problem that we're worrying about. We're not digital on the farmer side right now, it's all offline. But currently the offline is basically us trying to speak their language, trying to build a long-term relationship, and trying to engage people within the community to sort of build the community for us.
Yeah, I think that's an important strategy, right? Because you're not going to have technology adoption at that level, particularly with smaller farmers, when they don't know you, they don't trust you, they're not sure about whether they want to invest the time and effort to learn a new technology when you're just a new player and starting up, right? So essentially, first has to be get the right incentives in place, build that relationship. They see some material gain coming out of it, and then say, look, there are better ways to sort of unlock even more value that's being left on the table. What's been the issue on the quality side? Help us understand, like, because that's something like, I've always been fascinated by in sort of Pakistan. And I was telling you earlier before we started recording, I'm headed back to Pakistan, right? So I live here in the US. You go to the supermarket and you have everything from small cage-free eggs to jumbo XL genetically modified eggs, right? You go into the egg aisle and it's like 10 feet long and 6 feet wide, right? Or 6 feet high. You don't see that in Pakistan, mainly because there is no categorization. And, as you were describing earlier, you're doing some of that on the potato side. But that, again, categorization is quality control, right? You can't categorize if you're not doing efficient quality control. So what's that been that experience been like? And what are some of the challenges in the food supply chain in Pakistan that leads to that quality challenge?
Right. So I think the key, I think if you want to solve this problem, you have to go all the way back to what happens on the farm right now. And the reality is that most of the farmers are do not have access to information. They do not have access to great inputs. There's a lot of counterfeit going on over there. And based on these two problems, and then there is the problem of not having access to capital, which compounds or which sort of really deepens this overall problem. What this leads to is starting from even the starting point, there is a lot of problems in quality, right? The next problem is that there is no incentive. There's not a lot of incentive to produce great quality, and it's mainly because the quality is not really clearly determined until the produce moves all the way forward to the retailer, right? So I'll tell you. So for example, starts with for example, let's talk about mangoes again, right? Starts with a farmer. Somebody most likely has that farm on theka, as we say it, or on rent, right, or on a contract. Uh, that person sells to a Bipari. A Bipari is somebody who aggregates multiple farms. That Bipari sells it to in a sort of like a typical supply chain, that he sells to a large mandi, to an arti in a large mandi. That arti or a commission agent sells to somebody called a Padhiya in Lahore, and I think something in Karachi. I don't remember. I always forget that word. But he sells to a Padhiya on commission, who's a wholesaler, and then it goes to the retailer, right? The retailer buys from the Padhiya. Now, until the product gets to the Padhiya or the retailer, it's never opened, right? The RT even sells the product. He sells 100 cases of mangoes by just showing the people 2 cases, and in a bid which is actually startling for a lot of people. If you see that whole auction process, he sells 10 he sells 100 cases of mango in a matter of 15-20 seconds, and he does that over and over again, and the turnover is extraordinary, right?
So, sorry to interrupt you here, but I would just, for those listening, like if you live in Pakistan, Lahore, Karachi, any of the cities or towns, it is truly an experience to go in the morning at 5 a.m. to a mandi and experience that auction process take place. And you're absolutely right. It's the same for coriander, it's the same process for other fruits and vegetables where it's a couple of things are checked and then the rest just moves on through the supply chain.
Absolutely. And the product moves all the way to the final Padhiya or the retailer without getting quality checked, right? And what that leads to is no incentive for producing high quality, right? So we said, to recap, one, the farmers don't have great farming practices because of poor access to information and inputs, and of course capital. And then even if they produce great quality, there is no incentive, to sort of there is no incentive that they're going to get for producing high quality. So they're generally okay with getting by. Uh, the two of these factors combined lead to what we get in Pakistan. And when so how did we start, right? Me and Mohsin, we just went to these retailers every evening after work, and we said, we want to sell to you, and tell us what you want to buy. And they said, they looked at our faces and they said, you're gonna buy for us? We said, yes, we're gonna buy for you. And we said, they said, okay, get me a kacha pakka aam, which is 2 days old, and this is exactly what I need. And we tried to do that. It's a very long story, but what we very quickly realized was that we are not able to provide them the right quality, and it was because two reasons. One, we didn't have the experience to buy that, and two, there was no consistent quality coming from the back, right? Every day it was different. Every wholesaler was selling a different quality and a different price, and that was like a aha moment for us. And we said, okay, so let's try to sort of standardize the quality. Let's try to provide consistent quality day in day out, whatever way we do it. Our method was, of course, providing a QA QC service, or building a QA QC operation through which we could standardize, right? So we could grade and sort and separate what does this retailer need, what could be sold for a premium, what would actually be sold for a discount, and what would go to waste. And we did that all very early in the perishability cycle. And as soon as we started doing that, and there was a month where every day our customers would call us in the evening, in the morning, and they'd tell us that you've just screwed us, right? Because this is their livelihood, right? But as soon as we sort of started providing this consistent quality through our sorting grading operations, we realized that the amount of stickiness, the amount of retention, the frequency of purchase really skyrocketed, right? Now our customers, and it's probably a number that is unheard of in any other sector, our customers place orders with us almost 5 times a week, right? They have a daily replenishment cycle. The retention numbers are very high, and it's not because it's not a price factor. It's just that we are able to provide them a consistent quality day in, day out, by our sorting and grading operations. But this does not solve the root cause, which is basically poor farming practices, right? And that is where we want to be at a later stage, in a later part of our journey, where we actually provide these farmers great, high quality input. We provide them the right information. What do you farm at what part of the year? What kind of practices? When do you water? When do you harvest? All that. And we provide all the inputs on credit and solve their access to capital problem. We buy their produce. They know that we're going to buy from them at this price, and we solve their ROI problem also. And in doing so, we make sure that we also get the right quality from the farm, as opposed to us making superficial, interventions at a very later stage, and not really, making, superficial interventions have, do not have great, game-changing impact. So that's where we want to be.
And there's only so much scaling you can do, right, through that intervention. Like if you scale
Yeah,
up, let's say 10, 15, 20x, the sorting operation can't grow 15, 20x.
yeah.
It's just going to eat a lot of your cost and your profit margins in the middle. Um, from a product standpoint, you mentioned potatoes in terms of how you're sort of segmenting the market there. What are other products that you're in? Secondly, are you currently in Lahore, and would just want to get a sense of, you obviously raised a brilliant funding round. What's the growth plan in terms of what's next for Tazah?
So I think that's what really keeps us up, keeps up at night. We just have covered 5% of Lahore. We've already sort of, we're moving more than, 6, 7,000 kgs a day of produce. We only have covered under 5% of Lahore. And, we just want to expand out very fast. Initially, we were undercapitalized, we were under-resourced. We're solving those problems very quickly. Our business scaled up faster. Our infrastructure was behind. Our technology was behind. We're trying to make sure that, they also catch up. Now we just moved to a very we moved to a very sort of purpose-built facility for our warehouse, and that was also becoming a problem for us because we're moving a lot of produce in a very small space. So we overcoming those challenges. Initial target is to sort of scale very quickly to all of Lahore within the next 2-3 months, and then also get into grow in two ways, right? One, we expand into other cities and build a network, because as we scale, it provides us more sort of ammunition to work with a larger number of farmers and buy their produce for all year round. And two, we also want to expand into fruits, right? Right now we're just doing vegetables, but we also want to do fruits. So that's also an expansion area, which is short to medium term. So say 6 to 12 months. In the long term, of course, we talk about contract farming and access to credit problem for these farmers. So that's an area of expansion for us. And very long term, I know you haven't asked for it, but very long term, we're trying to solve the we want to be a farmer super app where they perform all their whatever they want to do on their app. Again, it's a very sort of trendy thing to say, but that's where we want to be, where they buy their inputs through our app. They sell their produce through our app. They get all the information that they need through our app. They get access to credit through our app. So that's where we want to be in a sort of not so distant future.
I think that super app is a buzzword, but I think that's what my mind was going to, as well as you were describing where you're going and how you're trying to solve this problem. Because to me, the parallel is, for example, what's going on across the border in India. There are startups like Ninja Cart there. And the Indian government just announced that it's going to make, through partnerships with companies like Cisco, it's going to make its farmer database, different siloed databases public, so that these companies can crunch the big numbers around soil health, how much fertilizer farmers are using because they get subsidies on that. So the state has that data. Weather patterns, the state has that data. Water consumption patterns, the state has that data. And it's basically letting private companies to build the technology stack that says, hey, you are a farmer in district X of state Y. Here's all the data, build your models, and then go work with the farmers to say, this is how much fertilizer we think you need at this point of the year. This is how we're going to grade it, sort it, do the contract farming with them, right? So I think Pakistan's government hasn't gotten to that point, but you're already thinking in that direction. I think that's exciting because that's the kind of disruption our agriculture market needs, not only to meet the growing food demand domestically for a growing population, but also Pakistan has a lot of potential on exporting fruits and vegetables, right? And like mangoes, you mentioned it a couple of times. Even here, when you get the mangoes in the United States, when the mango season is on, you have these issues around quality control, right? So the one pet peeve I have with mangoes is always that the sap of the mango tree burns the flesh, and there's a black spot on the mango, and that's a quality control problem. But the farmer doesn't know how to clean that sap off. So by the time it lands up here in Washington, D.C. or Houston or wherever, the sap has burned a hole in the mango, and that causes fungus, that causes all sorts. That's a loss for everybody in the supply chain, right? So I was asking, like, from you mentioned some of the issues that keep you up at night. Obviously, it's still very early days for you guys. But what were some of the early assumptions that you made about the market that are being tested and you're trying to figure your way through them?
Right. So I think initially a few of them, and a lot of them proven wrong actually. Initially, what we thought was that if you serve, uh, going to mandi is a huge problem for some of the businesses that we sell to. So these are these small vegetable sellers who have their kiosks and all. And we felt that if we are able to give them just the delivery, it's going to sort of be a game changer for them, and they're just going to be converting to our platform. And what we realized very soon was that this is actually, they don't think of this as a chore, right? They think of this as a part of their daily activity, and they go to these mandis, they have people that they hang out with over there. They have their routines. They go to this place, they have their chai, and they have all of that, right? So just providing them delivery of products at their kiosks was not enough. So then pricing, we thought pricing could be a play, wasn't a major play until we solved the quality part, right? And made sure that they could get consistent quality, which ensured that they could sell to their customers profitably. We had challenges, right? So a couple of assumptions on how we would be able to convert these customers on convenience or on price didn't prove true, and we actually hit the nail when we started providing the right quality. Another thing that we initially thought, and that was very sort of superficial of us to think of, is that it's just the artis who are actually creating all this problem, right? The problems are much more deeper, right? They are more structural. Perishability in itself is such a huge problem that it makes the market a market of passing the parcel, right? Because you're just passing something which is very hard. You don't want to end up holding the bag when the product perishes, right? So you're just passing it on. It's also because there is no way to forecast the supply and demand of the products at a macro level, and there is no way to even at a macro level make sure that you don't have periods of oversupply. So what happens today in the periods of oversupply. So for example, potato is going to be coming in full flow in January, right? And there is no way you could sort of stop that, because that's how our weather system, that's how our seasonality works, right? So there is a lot of wastage, 30% post-harvest loss according to ADB in Pakistan. And it's just how the market is structured, and that just leads to some of the inefficiencies, and it's not the artis in themselves. So much so that we've come to realize that if we didn't have these middlemen today, we would all be hungry, and even the farmers would not be able to sell their produce, because they provide some very important intermediation. They provide a very important access to market, which the farmers don't have. Without them, they provide access to capital even bigger. So they're also kind of like buy now pay later players or lenders. They have credit extended to their customers. So these wholesalers, they have credit extended backwards, and if artis were not extending this credit, was nobody else would, right? And the alternatives to the loan sharks that they have in their own regions, they're actually even worse, right? So this assumption that we started out with that we're going to eliminate the artis and the middlemen and make a very efficient supply chain, that really wasn't true. And what we realized was that there are a lot of structural problems to be solved. We have to build an efficient supply chain, much more efficient than what we have today. But the players in the system that exist today, they are, of course, they are sometimes exploitative when they can, but they also add a lot of value.
Yeah, I think that's one thing, like most people who don't fully understand these markets get wrong, right? That the middleman is actually providing some level of risk, or absorbing some level of risk and providing some level of credit to the market. And yes, it's not at low interest rates, or they're not like doing it for charity, so they're making a buck there. But they're also absorbing a lot of risk, right? And my experience growing up has been like my father worked as his business in Jodia Bazaar, so I would grow up going there, and there you would see at 9 a.m. all the sabzi mandi guys would come in, and they sort of like had bought their bulk, and they were breaking the bulk and sorting things on their own, etc. And as a child, you just view them, talk to them, get a sense of what they were doing, and you realize that yes, the market wasn't efficient, but the middleman who was extending credit to them, right? Like this kiosk owner does not have 10,000 rupees to buy produce, right? What he's basically doing is just in time. He's telling the guy, give me a loan for 10,000. I'll sell my produce today, tomorrow, and I'll give you back 10,000 plus something so that, it's worth your while because I'm not a credit worthy enough person. So you need some level of risk reward there. But it works. It's inefficient. It works, but we need to make it more efficient. And I think this wholesale idea of like RTs are terrible, let's get rid of them. If we just get rid of them point blank, it's not going to work. The entire market will collapse. So we need alternatives to be built up as we do that. From sort of, overall policy around agriculture, you said your families have been involved in this sector. Obviously, now you're full on studying this, implementing disruptive technologies into this. What has been sort of the big challenge on a policy level with agriculture, right? Because we frequently hear, I've grown up hearing government X announces new agricultural package, government Y announces X. They keep announcing new packages, but fundamentally, structurally, the problems remain the same. Just today, I woke up and was reading the paper from Pakistan, and the finance minister announced we're going to eliminate some taxes and control the price of wheat and sugar. It doesn't really work. So you have experience in this sector. Like, what is the problem that policymakers don't seem to understand to solve this problem?
I would not I would confess that my understanding on the policy side on the agriculture is not very strong. We try to build our own thing in very cut off from the larger policy realities of Pakistan. We shouldn't really, we should be more attuned to what's happening around us at the macro level. But we, at this point in time, we just super razor sharp focused on, just finding the PMF for our customers, just scaling. But we would want to work with government on some of these topics, but at this point in time, I'd be very honest, our understanding of that side, what we know is that, what's great for us is that this sector does not have, VAT. That really makes a lot of things easier for us to work on. But other than that, we feel that, government should be a part of, government should be aligning incentives or, removing roadblocks. But more than that, I think as a believer of free markets, I don't think that, there is much that they can actually do to solve some of the more deep-rooted issues other than just aligning the incentives and making sure that they don't play with the free market too much. But again, that's my opinion, and it's mostly uninformed or very superficial, to be very honest.
Yeah, and I mean that's fair enough. Just overall, you're absolutely right. Like there's two markets that I've sort of looked at over time. One is rice and one is wheat. And rice market, the state does not play a role. And you don't hear of crises in the rice market, even though Pakistan exports a ton of rice, right? And the wheat market, where the government plays a big role, you hear about frequent crises. And I'm like, well, here's the evidence, right? So I'm with you on the fact that the state should just get out of the way and line incentives and let the market play its role, because we've seen it in markets like rice and maize that this has worked. You worked at Careem, you sort of seen the growth of Pakistan startup ecosystem. One of the questions I frequently get from, younger listeners in particular is that, we've seen sort of this shift happen, and this shift has occurred, I would say, mainly because of Careem, but in the last 24 months where the startup ecosystem has gone, it's sort of accelerated. Is, my generation of people or your generation of people growing up would be like, after studying, they, weren't too keen on civil service jobs. Some were, but, it was like, okay, I want to go to Bank Al Falah, or I want to go to MCB, or I want to go to Engro, etc. Good multinational jobs with good benefits. Most young people don't want to do that. They find it boring, right? And they're like, I want to succeed at a startup. But not everyone can succeed at a startup, and education systems in Pakistan don't really skill you to work at a startup because we're lacking at a structured level on creative thinking, problem solving skills. So given that you sort of, had a front row seat in Pakistan startup ecosystem, what would you tell aspiring entrepreneurs or those that, say want to excel at Tazah or want to excel at the next Careem, etc.? How do you succeed at being in this type of a hyper growth startup?
So I think, yeah, you have made an absolutely great point. We're seeing, the opportunities that we have today. You have a dream, you have a big idea, you go to these VCs, you raise money, and you just just execute it, right? That opportunity did not exist over here. The kind of money that is being raised in Pakistan, even US companies in US would struggle to raise money on the kind of valuation caps at which the companies in Pakistan are raising, right? So it's a bit of an exaggeration, but what point I'm trying to make is that we're living in a very interesting time. People who want to go out there and make a difference. Previously, you would go to a bank and they would say, off, right? This is
Yeah, the bank still says like, bring me salary slips from the last 2 years
yeah,
and blah blah blah. It's like, dude, I just graduated college. What are you
yeah.
talking about?
So we're living in very interesting times. I think without going into what has kicked this off, because a lot of things have sort of come together for this to go this way, and Careem has a major role to play in this. The Careem exit was something that triggered a chain of events, which also sort of led to what is happening in the region today. But I think for aspiring entrepreneurs, a few things that really sort of matter are: one, I think you should be passionate about what you do, and it's again so very sort of kind of cliched kind of advice, but I've seen that if you're not passionate about what you're doing, and especially if you're solving a hard problem like ours, like agriculture, which requires just digging your feet heels in and solving that problem in the long term. If you're not passionate about the problem, you get burnt out very quickly. You've seen that with very smart people. You've seen that with very industrious, hardworking people. When they're not excited about the problem that they're solving, and it's just a means to, for example, a great name on the CV, or it's a way to sort of make more money, it generally sort of does not end up well, and it leads to burnout and fizzling out of the system. So I think people should take more time in building up their excitement, their passion about the problems that are being solved. If it's not there, it generally does not lead to a great outcome. One, and I think two, a sort of joint point that I want to make is that you also need to have a lot of resilience, and especially in early stage startups. There's so much failure that you encounter day in day out, and if you're not comfortable with that, you again are going to sort of be unhappy, and eventually not like what you do, and eventually just sort of get out of the system. Again, not a great outcome. Resilience is super important. Being comfortable with failure is super important. Just keeping just moving, just being in motion, and okay, friend, I failed, let's do something else, and doing that over and over again over a long period of time is something that really I think helps in early stage startups and entrepreneurship in general. And I think finally, being uncomfortable with uncertainty is also something very important, right? Especially in these early stage startups in which you're trying to build markets or business models or operating systems that never existed. You're always treading in an uncertain sort of space, right? And if you're not comfortable with that, that also sort of does not lead to great outcomes. If you are somebody who's very structured, it's good to be structured. I don't have anything against that. But if you're very structured to a point where you cannot sort of make decisions when you don't have clarity, I think that does not work. So if I were to recap, I think being passionate about your problems you're trying to solve, two, having a lot of resilience, being okay with failure, and still going at it helps, and then being comfortable with uncertainty and going into uncharted territories also helps, especially in early stage startups, but I think entrepreneurship in general too. I've never done traditional entrepreneurship, so I wouldn't know much about it, but early stage startups, I feel that these 3 points are very important.
I think the point on resilience is so important, right? And I'm glad you brought it up. Not many people bring it up. And just generally, I would say even beyond working in startups, if you're starting in your career, odds are that your 21-year-old self is going to get a lot of things wrong. Your 25-year-old self is going to get a lot of things wrong. You're going to make mistakes. And if you have it in you to, say, how can I make things better? I'm going to screw up, be open to that, and then pick up new skills along the way, right? And like, as you were describing the resilience point, I remember my 24, 25-year-old self had to work with a database, had no idea about SQL and Python, right? And we were using Excel, the database kept crashing, the analysis wasn't coming out right. And at some point I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna go teach myself Python to fix this and clean it up and learn it myself. Took me 3 months. But that's how you have to be, right? Because there's going to be a problem, and especially at a startup where skills are hard to come by, nobody's going to know everything. So you have to pick up the skills. And those that pick up those skills faster and realize that here's a problem, I'm going to help you sort this out, is going to excel, and the rest are going to fizzle out. So that's very, very important advice. Before I let you go,
Yeah.
go ahead.
No. So I was just saying that, when we started out, I told you that, there was almost a month where we failed consistently in this, right? We were trying to sell the right quality every day. The customer is going to call us, hey, you screwed me because, I wanted to sell something else. There are no customers because I have poor quality. That's mainly on you. We tried selling through, different pricing models, different purchasing models. And, there was so much failure. And, also, almost every night me and Mohsin would have this 1 hour, 2 hours long phone call, where we were trying to sort of pick each other up. One day, I was down, the other day he was down. A lot of times we said, okay, let's just, go back to what we were doing because this does not make sense. We'll not be able to do it. But I think just having that resilience really helped, and having passion, being passionate about what we were doing also helped. So major point, super important. You made a great point about, encountering a problem, finding a way to sort of solve it without sort of, losing it, hey, I will not be able to do it. I think that's, if you're able to not take no as an answer, I think that's just a major, major, advantage that you have.
Yeah, for sure. So this has been a wonderful conversation, and I'm excited to see where Tazah goes. I think it's exciting that there is disruption and innovation coming in Pakistan's agricultural sector. It's long overdue. You're absolutely right that Careem's exit, the hard work a lot of people did in the startup ecosystem to make the case for why Pakistan's startup ecosystem was the next big thing, is beginning to pay off now. And it's exciting because ultimately, and I think you and I both agree on this, the market will innovate, right? If you align incentives, disruption will happen. It's not going to happen because the state has a policy X or policy Y. Yes, it can unlock, it can unleash momentum when it needs to by getting out of the way or reforming as needed. But ultimately, it's people like yourself who are on the ground, who have a thesis, and you know what? They need capital to grow. And I'm excited that that capital is finally flowing into Pakistan. So best of luck on that. Before I let you go, I always ask my guests 2 or 3 book recommendations, that books that you think people should pick up and read. They can be on any topic, business, fiction, nonfiction. So would love your recommendations on that.
Right. So I think a couple of books that are really helped shape who I am. I think one of them was, I read this book by Peter Thiel called 0 to 1, in which he talks about, how hard getting from 0 to 1 is, how do you get there and all. I think that really helped me, conceptualize how my 0 to 1 is going to happen. And even at points when I wasn't sure what to do, I think that book really helped me, cross some of the hurdles that I had in my life. There's this other book, it's by somebody called Jim Collins. It's called Good to Great. And in that book, he talks about, empirically, he looks at the stock market price of, I think, hundreds of companies. And he looks at, who are like long-term winners and who are like, and what are those attributes that differentiate long-term winners from, maybe, short-term winners and from complete failures. And I think that book and some of the leadership principles that he talks about, for example, there is a conversation on level 5 leadership, and how great leaders that he came across were extremely driven, but also very humble and not very sort of charismatic, or not very sort of not those backslapping gentlemen. So that really helped me shape how I thought about leadership. So there's this book also. There's this book called Sapiens by, I think, Noah Hariri or someone. I think I really liked it. I read it because a lot of people were talking about it. So I was just missing out what's happening here. And when I read it, I really sort of enjoyed and what I learned from it was how insignificant we are as where we are today, and how we think of ourselves as people who are going to be here forever. We think of us as very sort of powerful people, strong people who are going to change the world and all. But we aren't. We are completely insignificant, and that realization also sometimes helps to bring humility in what we do and how we conduct ourselves.
Yeah, I think the Sapiens book, for me, I had a similar feeling, and I had sort of another feeling out of that was that his point around, individually we're basically nothing, right? But collectively, humanity has this power of making myths, and those myths can transform the world and the environment that we live in, right? And the point you made around agricultural markets, getting the farmers together, speaking their language, bringing them together on this journey, connecting with the customer at a market level, that's transformative, right? Individually, you won't be able to do that. I won't be able to do that. But if you can convince key players in that agricultural market, in a society, in whatever way, shape, or form people are trying to change the world. That to me was a big, awareness of that book, was that individually nothing really can be done, but if you can, innovate and inspire people and collectively bring them together on something meaningful, then the world can be transformed. It was a brilliant book, and so I'm glad you recommended that. And I think the Jim Collins book, Good to Great, I'm sensing a pattern here because I've had a couple of other Careem Mafias on the podcast, and that has come up a few times. So I'm guessing that that's a common thread across the Careem world, is that read this book, and I haven't read it, so it's definitely on my list. So thank you for recommending that as well. Abrar, this has been a fantastic conversation. Wishing you and your team all the best. It's exciting that you've raised a fantastic funding round in the very early stages of your startup, and more great things to come. So keep at it.
No, thank you very much for having us, and thank you for a great conversation.
Yeah. Take care.
Take care.